Hey group. So I did the Lectio Divina exercise with my buddy Carl. He's a good guy. So we when we did it, we read through, and it was interesting what stuck out. For him, he is the worship leader at the youth group that I kind of help out with, intern with, whatever. Uh, um, I do a little bit more of kind of hanging out with the pastor, and he does the worship. But we're good buddies. And the last verse stood out most to him because it says in verse 6 of Psalm 13, "I will sing to the Lord because he has dealt bountifully with me." So obviously the "I will sing to the Lord" stood out to him. And you know the first four verses are David's crying out to God and asking him basically, "Are you going to come help me out? And when? I need you now." Uh, and so both of us actually, the last two, verse 5 for me stood out and verse 6 for him stood out. And it was interesting because verse 6, it found him where he was. Um, After, my friend Carl laments and he cries out to God. Um, he sings to the Lord. He sings to the Lord about the way that God brings him out of um, the valley that he's in and deals bountifully with Carl. For me, verse 5 stood out. So for me, after I'm lamenting and after um, I'm in the valley and I'm struggling, I sometimes realize that the phrase "my heart shall rejoice in your salvation" stood out to me because I think this is pertinent to where I think my community is, our culture and our country, in a certain way. Um, and for me, I sometimes forget that I'm a very happy kind of guy, um, and I rejoice in a lot of things. But sometimes when I am struggling to find things to rejoice in, I forget that I should rejoice in my heart. If nothing else, should rejoice in the salvation of God, and that He's brought me out of every valley that I'm in. I have to remember that He will bring me out of the valley that I'm currently in. So, for both of us, as we walked through, we realized that the lamentations and the crying out to God is important, but what stood out for us was the last two verses, the verses where David's like, "Thank you, God, for bringing me out of this. I rejoice in your salvation, and I sing of your bountiful dealings with me."